Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to Overwatch Database, and we are here with our post Week 1 Countdown Cup power rankings. Remember, these are all just for fun and just, personal opinions, so don't take them too seriously. Jumping right in, we're not going to go over the bottom teams too much because bottom six teams in our power rankings, only one of them played actually this week, and that was the number 20 LA Valiant. They continue to not only win a game, couldn't take a map. They lost to New York 3-0 and then Seoul 3-0. So nothing much to talk about there. I do want to say I thought that Silver 3 looked a lot better, especially on like the ball and stuff. I thought that he didn't feed nearly as much as he had been. I thought Crystal played pretty well. So I think overall, like some of the players on the team are playing better, but they still were, wasn't good enough to take a map. Number 19, the Vancouver Titans. We didn't see them play this week. At number 18, we have the London Spitfire. We didn't see them play. Number 17, the Guangzhou Charge. They are 3-9. So they're the first team so far that have a win this season, and they did not play either. Teams that we actually had move around in the rankings a little bit. At number 16, the Florida Mayhem. We moved them down one spot just because of some other teams that had looked impressive that were behind them. They have two matches coming up this week, one against Boston, and what I feel like, even though Boston's pretty decent, I feel like maybe is a winnable game for Florida to try to get, back on track a little bit. At number 15, we have the Toronto Defiant, who also did not play again this week. Like, for some reason, like, all the bottom teams in the league just seemed to have the week off. And what do you know? It was actually, there was a lot of competitive games this weekend. So they are 15th with a 6-6 record. We did bump them down two spots as well, mostly for the team in front of them. At number 14, the New York Excelsior. Now, they were impressive this week. I think they were one of the most surprising teams. So yes, one of their games was against the Valiant, which they took in a 3-0 sweep. And then their second match was a 3-2 win over Shanghai, which, when you look at the context of it, Shanghai was resting players, and they haven't really been scrimming as much. And they've been, they publicly came out and said that because they're trying to avoid burnout. So with all that in mind, it doesn't look as impressive as it could, but they still beat Shanghai. I mean, they were still playing Izayaki, Void, Fleta. Like, they were still playing good players. So I think overall it was still a good win for New York. That's why we see them moving up two spots. Number 13, the Hangzhou Spark with a 7-7 record. We moved them down one. I'm officially off the Hangzhou Spark hype trade. I was really never on it, in the first place personally. But especially after, they lose to the Seoul Dynasty 3-2, and Hangzhou had a 2-0 lead in that series. So they should have been able to close that out, but they let Seoul reverse sweep against them. And then they got beat pretty bad by the Philadelphia Fusion, who, granted, looked better this stage, but I think Philadelphia should have been a very winnable game for them. So definitely Hangzhou Spark stocks are way down right now. Getting into number 12, the Paris Eternal. We kept them pretty close to where we had them last time. Only bumped them down one spot. I was really ready, honestly, after they had beat Dallas on the first game of the weekend to put them up a whole bunch of spots in our rankings. And then they came out and lost to Boston. And it was rough because I felt like it was a game Paris certainly should have won. And I think they really wasted a lot of opportunities. I really believe Paris has the ability to be the best NA team in this meta for this stage right now. I just worry that they're not going to live up to it. It really looked like it, that they were going to after that first match, but they were not able to. Number 11, the Boston Uprising, also with a 7-7 record. We moved them up three spots, and pretty much the only reasoning for putting them one over Paris was just the fact they beat Paris. So I figure, if you're doing a power ranking head-to-head, that should kind of mean something. But they also looked really good. Outside of that Paris game, they played the Shock, and I know they lost 3-1 to the Shock, but I thought that they really played well. They just wasted opportunities. It was kind of like Paris against Boston in that series, where I thought Paris should have won. They just really wasted opportunities. I felt like Boston, especially map 1, they really had that in the bag, and they blew it right at the end and choked. Otherwise, that would have been, I think, a really close series with Boston having a good chance to win.
Honestly, with Boston this week, my god, dude. Like, Valentine holding his ults really and not really using them and just holding back, and just the DPS they were running didn't really work well. And I would have to say, just from this week, their tanks were doing the best on their team. Like, no one else was really doing anything like important. And I think that if you only have the tanks doing a lot of the work, you're not going to get much value, and that explains how they just completely botched it this week.
Especially against a good team like the Shock, you need all the pieces in your roster to be working together. And I really like you pointing out the tank line. I thought Punk had the best weekend we've ever seen out of him. I thought he played out of his freaking mind, especially the first match where they beat Paris. Getting into the top 10, We have the Philadelphia Fusion. They stay 10th, actually, from where they were last week. I know a lot of people might still not be super high on Philly because they looked so bad for so long. But when you look at, what they did this weekend, they 3-0'd Shanghai. Again, Shanghai's not scrimming as much, and they weren't playing all their starters. But then they came out and beat the Hangzhou Spark 3-1. And even though I'm kind of low on the Spark, I still think they're a decent team who you cannot take lightly. And I thought that was the game that really showed me, hey, Philadelphia looks like they're getting back on track. And I mean, they have a 9-5 record, so I thought they just had to be in the top 10. And, 10th, I think, isn't really overrating them, in my opinion, because they do have, 2 to 3 more wins over every single team we ranked below them. Number 9, the Washington Justice, 8-6 record. We put them down 5 spots. I had them at 4th going into this stage, and that was clearly like way too high. I really thought that they were starting to figure it out at the end of the last stage, and I think they were. And I don't know why I had faith in the Justice to start off a stage with a new meta because they have not done that all year. But it's such a frustrating team, man. I think, in the beginning of the year, I thought they'd be like a top 3 team. And it's just so frustrating to watch. They have so much talent. Assassin at times looks amazing as a rookie, and then there's other times you just don't know what the hell he's doing. Like, he looks horrible, and there's just no consistency there. I think Decay has been all right. Not on the same level he was last year, but, Mag and Fury have been an all right tank line, and Baby and Closer have been better supports than most people thought. I thought they would actually be decent, but a lot of people didn't, and they've been good. So it's a really frustrating team that I think clearly coaching is a big issue and is the biggest issue for this team holding them back. That one play on Rialto where Assassin literally just jumped. He was walking over the bridge on that one part of the map, and he literally fell off into the water and killed himself. That really sums up the Justice season, in my opinion, right there. That one moment is just so close, and they just trip over themselves. Number 8, the Chengdu Hunters. So we moved them down 2 spots. They have a 7-5 record. They did not play this week, and that is why we moved them down 2, just because a few teams that were behind them really impressed. So it's not really a knock on Chengdu. I still think they're a borderline top 5 team almost, and I think they'll be really good this stage. It's just we didn't see them play, and we saw other teams behind them play that were impressive. So that was just kind of the only reason for that. Next week, I think we'll see them move back up again. And one of those teams that I was just talking about, number 7, the LA Gladiators, 9-5. They lost to Atlanta in a really close 5-map series this weekend, but then they followed up that loss with a 3-0 sweep of the Justice. Looked really good. So I think for the Gladiators, though, it's the same old thing. They look like they're really close to being an elite top team, but I feel like coaching holds them back. I didn't think they were really particularly prepared. I don't like, they started, I think the Atlanta series, they started off running, I think, Mir and Kevster on the DPS line, but I think they need to stop taking out Birdring. Like, I really like Mir a lot, but Birdring needs to stay in the starting lineup. Birdring Kevster is your best starting DPS lineup. So I just think they need to stop messing with it. And I think, again, like I said, coaching, that comes down to a lot of coaching. I know there's things they see with Mir that they can do, but I think the biggest thing with this team is just keep running the same lineup and build that, continuity together. Number 6, the Houston Outlaws. We dropped them 3 spots. I caught a lot of flack last week for having them at number 3, actually. And let me tell you, after that first game when they 3-0'd the Justice, I was feeling real smug a lot because I got a lot of crap for having them at 3. And then they lost to Atlanta, and I felt much less smug after that. So we moved them down 3 spots to number 6, but they still have a 10-4 record. I still can't bring myself to put them lower than that. I think they have so much potential. What I've kind of noticed with Houston is it really has come down to coaching. When they have prepared for a meta properly and look really prepared, they are good enough to beat anybody. And I mean anybody. But when the coaching isn't at an A+ level, and like it was this week, and they're not completely prepared, they suck. Like, there's no in between. And I think it's because when you look at the Houston Outlaws roster, they don't have the talent that the Shock have. They don't have the talent that the Dallas Fuel have overall on their roster. Like, their roster is good, they have good players, but it's not at the same level of these teams. So when the coaching is A+, they beat those teams, and they've had A+ coaching and had those moments where they beat those teams. But if it's not completely up to snuff, they cannot beat these teams, and I think it's just they don't have the individual talent quite that the others do. So their peaks are still incredibly high, but they just have these moments where, like this weekend, it was the stupid, running Jake on BAP. Like, I get why they
needed a break. Oh my god, we went over that like so many times during that game. We were just like, we need them to get a break. We need them to get a break, because you had Edison running Tracer, so another stun would have been great. Because the Outlaws weren't running any stun whatsoever. And, like, you had Masa running Brig, so obviously Dante's on Tracer, and he's going to get, like, countered by that, but obviously he wasn't getting completely countered. He would get out quite often. But they needed some sort of, like, extra value there where you can get more damage in and be, like kind of brawly and also get healing out of that. That's why I think a Brig would have worked there. Like, I was also thinking of Moira too, maybe. Just I know you said that it would not work as well, but with them running D.Va and Ball, I think a Moira would have worked for a lot of healing output.
Yeah,
but
anything besides the BAP. Just try anything. They just kept doing it though, and that was my biggest issue because with the heroes they were running too, they get no value out of the BAP ult. So I didn't understand why they were running it. I think it was fine to try for a map, but the fact that you stayed on it every single map and didn't even try running anything, and that's another example of the coaching. Like, why are you still running it? You're just, they've done this all year when they don't have a good grasp on the meta. They just bang their heads against the wall and keep running the same thing, and it's honestly drives me crazy to watch. I didn't understand that decision at all. Getting into the top 5, this is a team I have been hesitant to put this high all season, but at some point you just have to acknowledge they're having a great year. The Seoul Dynasty, okay, we put them up 2 spots. A lot of the season I didn't even have them barely in the top 10, but at this point, I mean, they're 11-3. They have the best record in the Overwatch League, and they have the best map differential. So at some point you kind of got to look at them and just, admit they're good, and I've always felt like they're good. It doesn't feel like Seoul is really a true contender. Every time they go up against Shanghai, I think they've got like swept 3-0 every time. Other than that, though, against pretty much every other team outside of maybe Chengdu, though, they dominate. So Seoul deserves to be 5th. I think that they just don't feel like a true championship contender to me. Like, I think some of the teams below them are actually more of a threat. Like, I think teams like the Gladiators and stuff that we have below them are probably actually more of a threat come end of season playoffs. But overall, you just look at the whole season, Seoul has been incredibly consistent. Number 4, another team I have been, according to a lot of people, underrating all year, the Atlanta Reign. We moved them up 5 spots from 9th to 4th. They have a 9-5 record, but most importantly, they had a absolute banger opening week of the Countdown Cup. They defeated the Los Angeles Gladiators. We talked about that earlier in a 5-map game. And then they 3-0'd Houston. So Atlanta is looking surprisingly strong. I didn't really expect them to come out and look this good. I thought they'd be, I think, okay in this meta, but I didn't think they'd, reach the peaks they have already. And then if you look at their, schedule coming up next week, they play the Florida Mayhem and the Dallas Fuel. So there's a really good chance for them to get like 3-1 in this stage, which I think would be like the 3rd stage in a row or something like that. So really impressive stuff from Atlanta, and I think I finally had to just acknowledge they are pretty darn good. And put them up to 4th. Plus, I think they're a team that probably can get farther at the end of the season than maybe like the Seoul Dynasty can. Getting into the top 3, the San Francisco Shock. We moved them up 2 spots at 10-4 record. They didn't overly impress me this week, but their first match was against the Fuel. It did go to 5 maps. It was very close. They very easily could have won it, and then they 3-1 Boston, who had just beat Paris. So overall, I think it was a solid week. I thought Nero really came alive this week, which I think is really big for this team, having him getting it going. And then I really like with the support line how they're running Violet and Twilight. I really like that a lot. I just think, as good as FD God is, he just didn't really fit with the team and has kind of struggled to integrate into the roster. So I think Violet Twilight is a great support line to have right now for this meta. We saw like Super playing ball, and I think kind of them getting better at the ball comps will benefit them. And like I said, Nero just kind of popped off. Ons played pretty well. So I think all in all, I'm a lot higher on the Shock than I was even just a week ago. I think that even though they went 1-1, I think they showed us a lot of stuff to, kind of make me feel like they are still a top 5 team that can win it all this year. If you would have asked me like 2 weeks ago if I said, you asked me if they could win the championship, I probably would have said no. Now I kind of feel like they should be in that conversation. And then number 2, the Dallas Fuel, also a 10-4 record. Couldn't really punish them too much. It's obviously disappointing that they didn't go 2-0, but Paris played a heck of a game, and then they did beat, the Shock, who are really good. So it was still a really good week. I think we're starting to see some of Dallas's flaws a little bit, not having a hit scan, even though that should be rectified soon, because I believe Pine's visa has got approved, and he's going to be in the States and I think in Dallas with the team in like a week. So that's really good for them. I think that's part of what factored in for me keeping them too. And I think, as every other stage, there's no reason to think that they won't continue to get better as it goes. So I think Dallas will be just fine. And then number 1, the Shanghai Dragons. I know they went 0-2, but I really don't think you can take them off the number 1 spot yet. Because, first of all, their coach, Moon, came out and said publicly, like, yeah, we've been kind of getting burnt out, the players and the staff. So we've been scrimming less. They're not practicing as much. They were playing, like, develop and, like, who are you and stuff in those matches this week. And giving, like, a lot of their bench players playtime, which I think is great. Most teams don't do that, and most teams aren't in a position to do that. And that's the reason they're doing it is Shanghai can literally go 0-4 this stage and still be number 1 in APAC. They have that locked up for playoffs, so they're just giving their other players playtime, and I think that's great. If you have an issue and you need to play these guys in playoffs, now they have some game experience. Your starters are scrimming and practicing less, playing less, so they're getting a little bit of a break during the season, and then come back just recharged come playoffs. And I think that's great. I think that's fine for them to do. I think if any team can do it and be fine and get away with it, I think it's Shanghai. And I don't really think them going 0-2 is a big deal because of that. Sure, one of them was to New York, and ideally you probably should still win that game, even I think with some of your backups in. But New York's also looking a lot better this stage, so I'm not worried about Shanghai. If they go winless the whole stage, there's a very good chance I would knock them out of first, but depending on how other teams, like Dallas, the Shock, and Atlanta and stuff do. But for right now, I'm still going to keep them number 1 just because their overall season has been so good, and it's not like they were playing their full starters and trying and, lost those games. So that is our Countdown Cup post-Week 1 power rankings. So taking a look at this, Connor, for you, is there anything that you would change or any opinions you have on it overall?
The only thing with the rankings this week that I would change myself are flip Washington and Philadelphia and put Philadelphia 9 and Washington 10, because I feel like Washington's on a downhill slope from this point and Philadelphia's coming up.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that was kind of a toss-up for me, just because I think Washington has such a higher potential. But yeah, I think that's definitely perfectly reasonable, and I think probably next week we'll see that. I think Philly has a really easy schedule this stage. Washington does not, so that is probably a change we could see definitely next week. So that's all we have for you in this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed the power rankings. Make sure to post in the comments your guys' power rankings. We'd love to see what other people think. Make sure to also like the video, subscribe. You can hit the bell icon for notifications. You can check this out on Apple Podcasts, as always, and our website, overwatchdatabase.com, which has the links for both of those down in the description. And we'll see you tomorrow with our weekly recap. And as always, enjoy the games this weekend. Thanks for watching.